The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call Phil Twyford.
Well, at least the Minister got to her feet and stayed on her feet for what? All of 3 or 4 minutes, which is more than we can say for all those 1-minute Johnnies on the government benches, for all those government backbenchers who are so proud of this policy of selling off state houses that they couldn't summon up more than half a minute speech to explain and promote their government's policies. Which, Mr. Speaker, I have to say raises the question of why this bill is being rammed through under urgency. What is it about this bill that means it has to be passed tomorrow? Are the members opposite in such a hurry to flog off billions of dollars worth of state houses to their property developer mates that it can't go to select committee? That the public cannot be given the opportunity to have a say and come along and make submissions? That the bill is so urgent that it has to be rammed through under urgency, under budget urgency? I would like to hear an explanation from the Minister or from other members from the government side why this bill has to be rammed through under urgency, because for the life of me, I cannot see what is so worthwhile or so urgent that it has to be pushed through under urgency. This bill, Mr. Speaker, is about flexible purchasing. It puts extraordinary discretionary powers into the hands of the Minister to do sweetheart deals with the people that he is wanting to sell these state houses to. He can ramp up the subsidies if he wants to, if it's a particular deal with a private landlord or a property developer that the Minister is desperate to do a deal with, or he can turn down the subsidies. And that kind of flexibility is exactly what National wants to be able to do the sweetheart deals they need to flick off these state houses, because they are desperate to offload them to anybody who will take them. And the Salvation Army walked away, the Methodist Mission walked away, the other community housing providers are basically saying the only way we could make this work is that not only if you give them to us at rock bottom prices, but if you heavily subsidise us into the bargain. This government, sir, has been a bystander while the housing crisis has got worse and worse and worse. House prices in Auckland have gone up $100,000 in the last year. $100,000 in the last year. They've gone up by 87% in Auckland in the last 6 years. But this government is deep in denial because they believe there is no housing crisis, that there is no problem, that speculators aren't a problem. Oh, actually, I think they just admitted on the weekend that speculators are a problem because they were so embarrassed by the Reserve Bank governor saying publicly that they had not done enough to tackle the housing crisis and that they should do something about the rampant property speculation that's driving house prices higher and higher in Auckland. People desperately wanted this budget to do something about the housing crisis. But there are so many gaps in this budget. It does nothing for the regions. It does nothing to diversify our economy. It does nothing to plan for future economic growth for New Zealand. But probably the biggest disappointment is that it contains nothing of any substance to fix the housing crisis. Today, sir, the government announced that they're going to make government land in Auckland available for housing developments. And I think everybody agrees that that's a good idea. The shame is that this government didn't do it 7 years ago when they came to office. Instead, what did they do? They derided and ridiculed the Helen Clark government's work on providing an inventory of government land available. They knocked that work on the head as soon as they took office, and they've sat on their hands for nearly 7 years. They've done nothing with it. And it was only as they scrambled around in a panic to find something to present to the public that would show that they were doing something about the housing crisis that they dusted off the work that was done by the former Labor government 7 years ago. What was really telling, when you watched Nick Smith, the housing minister, on the TV news tonight, or if you go to the Stuff website and see the story about him, he is asked by a journalist how many of the houses that they're going to build in Auckland on the vacant government land, how many of those houses will be affordable? And Nick Smith gave a sly little smile and said, I think they'll be affordable to somebody because somebody will buy them. And Mr. Speaker, that says it all. It is absolutely cynical. They don't care about the thousands and thousands of frustrated New Zealand families, Kiwi first home buyers who are desperate simply to get a roof over their heads and a home that they can call their own. And this government cynically, with this announcement today, as has been the case with the special housing areas, where fewer than 10% of the houses built are actually affordable. And the government's definition of affordable is anything under 550,000. So that shows the cynicism of this government. They weren't prepared to take up Andrew Little's challenge. They weren't prepared to promise to the public of New Zealand that all the houses built will be affordable. And all we got is Nick Smith with his sly little smile saying that they'll be affordable to somebody. All this government has done, Mr. Speaker, is tinker around the edges with half-baked policies that haven't made the slightest bit of difference to a housing crisis that's been getting worse and worse on National's watch. The special housing areas, which are the centrepiece of the government's attempt to deliver to the lack of supply of houses in Auckland, has been an abysmal failure. In a year and a half, 170 houses have been built under Nick Smith's special housing areas. 170. Auckland needs 13,000 houses every year just to keep up with population growth. Under National, a deficit of 20,000 houses has built up over the last 6 years. That's the Reserve Bank's number. 20,000 houses short. We need 13,000 a year just to keep up with population. And how many are being consented under National? Fewer than 8,000 a year. And that is why the shortage is getting worse and worse every year. Every day the shortage is getting worse. And that's why Auckland house prices are going up by $1,000 a day. Is it any wonder that it takes 50 years now on average to pay off the average home in Auckland? Is it any wonder that home ownership rates under this National government are the lowest in 60 years? 60 years, Mr. Speaker. And John Key says that there isn't a housing crisis. So other than these spectacularly unsuccessful special housing areas, what else has National done on the housing crisis? Well, 12 months ago, they unveiled another great policy of the National parties, and that was to remove tariffs and anti-dumping duties from varnish and nails and various building materials. Nick Smith stood in this House and promised that it would knock $3,500 off the cost of a new home. His own officials have advised that it would save a little over $1,000 and that money would be pocketed by developers, Mr. Speaker. That's the kind of policy that this National Party specialises in. They've been blaming the RMA for expensive houses since 2006. Since they were in opposition, they've been saying the RMA is the problem. And what have they done? Paul Goldsmith, what have they done about the RMA reform in 6 years in government? Absolutely zilch. The National Party has done nothing to reform the RMA after 6 years in government, and Bill English has got the cheek to stand up in this House and blame the RMA. What audacity. Their other bright idea, sir, was to throw subsidies at first home buyers under the Welcome Home loan scheme, and yet MB, Treasury and the Reserve Bank all told them it would make no difference, that it would drive up house prices and make the unaffordability crisis even worse than it already is. And now, Mr. Speaker, now the National Party thinks that selling off state houses to property developers is some kind of answer to the fact that people are living in cars and garages all around New Zealand, that people are rotting in substandard, cold, damp private rentals because there simply are not enough houses. But the National Party thinks the solution to that problem, rather than building more houses, is to change the ownership of the few houses that we have that are there as a dedicated pool of housing for the most vulnerable and the poorest New Zealanders. Somehow, selling them off to private developers is an answer to that problem. Sir, I just don't understand it. I don't understand what makes this National Party tick, and I don't know where they lost their moral compass.